BB-8 chirped sarcastically about the landing. Poe simply smirked back at him.
Hey, a good landing is anything you can walk away from. Certainly more than I could say about you. Don't make me point you floating technoball.
Poe quickly unstrapped himself and slowly rose from his cockpit. Below him, he was greeted by a dozen raised blasters. Poe smiled winningly and spread his arms wide.
Hey, I'm so very sorry I'm late to the party. Believe me, nobody told me just how long the lines are for Corellian brew. Must been standing there for hours on end, and that's not even mentioning all those little kiddies clambering all over me, just begging for a joyride in my X-Wing.
The men chuckled and lowered their blasters. Poe just as quickly descended from the nose of his fighter, removing his helmet. Poe was of an average height and build, with rather handsome angular features, tan skin, and wavy brown hair. All in all, he looked more like the face of some famous celebrity on a recruitment poster than one of the New Republic's most distinguished fighter pilots. But Poe didn't mind that much. It did wonders when on leave in the bars of the far reaches of the galaxy. A loud hiss. The holding clamps on the astromech slide opened, and BB-8 shot out of his seat. He landed in freefall before his anti-grav thrusters kicked in, hovering over the desert sands. BB-8 was a rather unique droid, and one the scruffy desert men couldn't help but gawk at. It was rectangular and ball-shaped with repulsors jutting out of the bottom like the stumps of legs. It was orange and gray in trimming, and had a dome-shaped head that narrowed slit-eyed like an angry cyclops. As they drew closer, BB-8 suddenly produced an arc caster from his chest, jutting out deadly volts of electricity as he chirped out a challenge to them. The men answered by raising their blasters at the floating ball of sass, and BB-8 simply laughed at them. Poe shook his head in annoyance.
But why do you always have to go pecking fights everywhere we go?
BB-8 turned his head and winked at his owner, chirping a boast.
Yeah, well one of these days you're gonna run into something as stubborn as you are, and I ain't cleaning up that mess.
BB-8 scoffed at him, then suddenly advanced on the blaster-wielding men like he was going to charge. They backed rather skittishly, and the floating droid laughed merrily, holstering his arc caster.
That droid is going to get you in a lot of trouble.
An elderly voice shot out from behind the massive men.
He mistakes gallantry with foolhardy.
The desert man stepped aside as perhaps the oldest man Poe had ever met stepped forward to greet him. He was tall, thin, and grizzled with snow-white hair and rather gaunt expressions. However, this was contrasted starkly by his eyes. They were eyes of a young man, eager for adventure and discovery. Eyes that Poe felt had seen the wonders of the universe and was still hungry for more.
Believe me, sir, I know.
He smiled at the elderly man before he extended his hand.
Commander...
Oh, Darren.
The older man replied with a sanguine smile as he took his hand with a strength beside his age.
You're of the Antigua sector and been of the First Order. Yes, I've heard a great many things about you.
As about you, Mr. Tekka.
Please, Commander, call me Lor San. I've been called by my last name since I left the Archaeological Guild.
Poe smiled like a child in the arms of a kindly uncle.
Council speaks very highly of you, sir.
Oh, Counselor, is she now? I much rather prefer Princess.
I don't think she's been called that in a very long time, sir.
Oh, she will always be royalty to me, Commander. Come.
He took the younger man by the shoulder.
I have something to show you.
I must ask, sir, but how did you...
Come to this place so far from actual dig sites and the prestige establishments? Master Skywalker put me up to this.
Poe stopped in his tracks, eyes wide in amazement.
Do you know where he is?
That they know.
He replied grimly.
Like you, I lost contact with his order 3 years ago. But before he disappeared, Luke asked me to look into something. A mystery, if you will. And as his good friend, I was more than happy to oblige.
Don't mind me asking, sir, but how did you come to, well, know him?
Ah, intrigued by the legend of Luke Skywalker, are we?
Well...
Poe laughed embarrassingly, rubbing his hands through his hair.
We studied him and his father's tactics back in the academy. Plus, my flight instructor and Tilly's, well, he liked to talk about him a great deal.
Yes.
Lor San smiled warmly.
Luke changed a great many lives, especially mine. In the days of the Empire, there wasn't much interest in the study of the past, or of the ancient cultures. not with Palpatine controlling the flow of information to suit his fancy. Then one day, a young man came to me with an offer of a lifetime. He wanted my help to discover the long-lost secrets of the Jedi that hadn't yet been destroyed.
Poe's eyes widened.
You helped build the Order?
Oh, I merely dug up old archives and found lost temples. That Luke was always wanting to show his gratitude. I'm not of the Force, but he always considered me an honorary member. I am not afraid to admit that those were the happiest days of my life.
I can certainly see why.
Parting through the Adobe village, they soon came across what Poe could only describe as a sinkhole, descending down into the cavernous depths like a black hole rising from the embers of a supernova. Lor San noticed the look of the younger man's face.
Did the princess tell you what it was you were coming to collect?
Poe shook his head.
With us being so close to the unknown regions, she didn't want to take the risk if I was captured.
Understandable. Please, this way.
They stepped onto the elevator system, slowly descending down to the depths below. For the first part, there was an absolute darkness only broken up by BB-8's torch. The droid beeped in discomfort, the sound echoing off of the walls deep into the world below.
I know. This place spooks me too.
He couldn't shake the feeling of unease that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was somehow worse than what he had seen in the graveyard. Somehow. Like an oppressive cold that he could not warm from.
I do not blame you.
Lor San interrupted his thoughts.
Not a soul has stepped into this place for many thousands of years.
How'd you find this place?
Very carefully.
Then they passed a certain point, and Poe could see light at the bottom. And when the platform hit the ground, his fear had turned into awe.
Oh, the Force.
He breathed, for before him was a city of stone and metal, where great and towering monuments and spires, ruined yet in grandeur, stood. It was unlike anything he had seen before, even by the temples of the Massassi on Yavin. It was as if he had stepped into another world.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Lor San asked with an aged smile. Poe could only shake his head in utter astonishment, his mouth agape. BB-8 answered with a chirp of equal shock, gazing at everything in sight.
You said it, buddy.
The two men walked amongst the ancient streets, flanked by the army of workers unearthing the ruins. Poe looked left and right to the towering temples, inscribed with pictographs depicting the populace before otherworldly beings, worshipping, presenting gifts. Poe could not speak, but could only gawk at the sights before him with BB-8 practically clinging to him. Yet beside it all was Lor San Tekka, who walked amongst those souls of the ancients like a stroll in the market. His face was strangely impassive.
Take it in, my good son.
He answered solemnly.
Or you may not see it again.
I don't understand.
There are secrets here. Secrets that in the wrong hands could spell disaster for the galaxy. And because of its location along the demilitarized sectors, it will not be long before we are discovered.
Poe nodded, understanding. The demilitarized sector was a buffer zone in all but name where the military forces of the galaxy's superpowers couldn't set foot in. However, the First Order had no scruples about breaking intergalactic law if they could get away with it. And with the state of the Senate and the Assembly, that was something they could do often. Even Poe, an officer in the New Republic Navy, was here illegally. Finally, Poe asked the obvious question that had been sitting in the back of his mind since he had set foot here.
What is this place?
A temple of the ancient Rakata.
The Regatta?
The first of the intergalactic civilizations to harness their power to carve out an empire. An empire that spanned much of the known galaxy. There are many such temples like this. Scattered throughout what used to be their territory.
What happened to them?
What happened to most empires? They fell, in part due to the first Jedi. However, their secrets and history are still buried among their ruins, including that which the princess has sent you to retrieve.
Which is what exactly?
Their greatest secret. The secret to the success of their power. Come, I will show you.
He quickly took the lead down the many trodden paths until, at last, they came across a mighty dome acropolis, painted gold in the light above. Through the ruined gates, the three entered, and there they found the remnant power that once sailed the stars and inspired all others to follow in their wake. For within the hall stood a monument of an alien Poe had never seen before. It reminded him of the Mon Cow with its fish-like appearance, but it was taller and leaner with a malevolent awe that made Poe realize the natural cruelty it possessed. Standing tall, its hands risen to the skies, was an orb. Lor San suddenly stepped forward, and the stone block beneath him sank, and with that, the orb simmered with a great power. Lights dazzled all around them. PB had cowered beneath Poe as he whirled around in the path of the illumination. Then the light shot outwards towards the center of the dome and began to spread. It was then that Poe understood what this place was, its purpose. It was an astrological hall, and there, spread across the constructed canvas above, was a star chart. But something was off. Poe did not recognize most of the formations presented here. He, of course, saw the center star holding the galaxy together. He could make out certain worlds within the core and inner rim, but most of them were in the unknown regions. It came to him. The map was incomplete, clearly one of a few pieces that needed to be put together.
Yes.
Lor San nodded.
By the look of your face, you two understand.
By these words, Poe's mind returned to his mission.
BB-8, stop documenting the map and create a holographic dimensional chart.
The droid nodded and diverted power to his thrusters. He rose high into the dome, flashes arcing out above as he began his work. Poe turned back to Lor San.
You said this place held the secrets to their success. What secret was that?
One that the First Order and the Empire before them have been searching for. An arcane technology so great it allowed the ancient shift to dominate much of the galaxy. In the records, they were known as Star Forges.
A forge? You mean like a factory?
Exactly that. These forges were powered by the dark side of the Force, capable of non-stop production of any imaginable material.
Like style dreadnoughts.
Among other things.
Oh yes, that was something the First Order will most definitely want to get their hands on.
How many of these things are there?
Only one. The rest were destroyed many years ago during the age of the Old Republic.
But how do you know this one wasn't destroyed as well?
I think you already know the answer to that.
Poe turned back to the map above, and his droid taking hollow shots of the images. He remembered again the most complete section was of the unknown regions.
The Cotton's reach was beyond any imaginable. They dominated every star and enslaved every race. According to my research, they had a forge within every seat of power, which became 5. 3 of these were destroyed during their fall, the 4th by the Jedi during the Sith Wars. If this map is accurate, then the 5th and last of them lies somewhere within the unknown regions.
And probably close to First Order space.
Indeed.
Lor San then turned back to the younger man, his face grim and somber.
Once your droid is finished, we shall return to the surface, and in turn, seal the entrance once more.
There was a great deal of pain in the archaeologist's face, and Poe understood why.
I'm sorry it has to come to this. This place looks like it would take years to fully document.
Better it be lost again than be found by the enemy.
Suddenly, a young boy came running into the room, frantic and out of breath.
Mr. Tekka! Mr. Tekka!
What is it, boy?
The men. They say that strange ships have jumped into the sector.
Poe's face hardened into that common amongst warriors.
We got company.